Everyone. We are so happy to welcome Joshua Becker to NASMM's Hello series. First, I want to tell you a little bit about Joshua for those of you who may not be familiar with him. Joshua was NASMM's keynote speaker at the NASMM 2015 conference in San Diego. Wow, what an exciting 7 years this has been for you, Joshua. He is also the author of the recently released book, Things That Matter: Overcoming Distractions to Pursue a More Meaningful Life. Joshua is also the best-selling author of The More of Less and The Minimalist Home, and he is founder of Becoming Minimalist, a website community dedicated to inspiring others to find more life by owning less. Joshua's website welcomes over 1.5 million readers each month, and he has inspired millions around the world to consider the practical benefits of owning fewer possessions. Joshua is also the creator of Simplify Magazine and founder of The Hope Effect, a nonprofit organization changing how the world cares for our orphans. Joshua is a contributing writer to Forbes magazine, and he has appeared in dozens of media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CBS Evening News, the Los Angeles Times, and the Drew Barrymore Show. Joshua and his family live near Phoenix, Arizona. Be sure to visit becomingminimalist.com and join nearly 3 million Becoming Minimalist followers. Wow, big stuff, Joshua. First of all, we at NASMM want to congratulate you on Things That Matter. It's really an essential book for our times. It's thoroughly researched with just pages of source materials and interviews, as well as compelling stories about your own life and other people you've encountered on your journey. Just big kudos, congratulations. I want to show everybody what the book looks like. It's just super. First
you
of
are
all,
very generous.
Well, I am, as you know, a big fan personally and professionally. And, this did not disappoint. I kept thinking after the first two books, what more, can be unearthed about this topic. And I thought you just did a tremendous job of sort of knitting together the whole notion of possessions and purpose and all of that. You kind of put a magnifying glass on how having, too many possessions really keep us from our personal objectives to have a more meaningful life. And it's very well done. So if I was going to summarize this book in one sentence, I would say the goal is to reach the end of life with more satisfaction than regrets. Do you agree?
That is a wonderful, a wonderful description. And then the question becomes, how do we do that? And the case I make in the book is we identify what is essential. We identify what is important. We recognize the pursuits in life that can distract us from it. And then we work to overcome those distractions every single day.
Right. And it's kind of a roadmap. The book is kind of a roadmap. And can you share with us what your inspiration was? What prompted you to put pen to paper and say, this is a message I need to get out?
Yeah. How do I not bore with a 10-year-old story? I started writing about minimalism 14 years ago, and I started to, after introduced to my neighbor, by my neighbor, and I started owning fewer things. I started realizing the less I owned, the more I freed up money, time, energy, focus for things that actually matter in life. And very early on became convinced that there is a better life to be lived when we own fewer possessions. And so as I became not just content with the idea of owning less, but desiring to own less, I started to ask the next question of, So what is the role of money in my life if it's not just to buy a bunch more stuff? And then I started to ask about, well, what's the point of work if I'm not going to work just to make a lot of money to go buy a bigger house and fill it with a bunch of things? And so that's really where these questions started to surface, and I started to get into some of these topics even on the blog. I used to do a weekend retreat up in Northern California, and I would talk about minimalism and owning less. And then I had a Sunday morning talk where I would talk about, hey, there are more distractions from meaning than just possessions. And so I would talk about technology and how it can be a distraction. I'd talk about money. I'd talk about accolades. I'd talk about possessions and leisure, and talk about a lot of these different distractions. And so I had just done that Sunday morning talk, which I loved because I really thought the weekend kind of led up to that. And then anyway, I was at a conference here in Phoenix with a guy named Charlie Gilkey. He had just written a book called Start Finishing. And as a part of the workshop, he said, I want you all to close your eyes and answer this one question. If you were to die today, what is the one thing you would most regret not accomplishing with your life? And I immediately thought of this book. I immediately thought of, I would regret not taking that Sunday morning conversation about distractions from purpose and putting it into a very easy to follow, practical way to read. So that's the story behind the book.
Wow. Excellent. Thank you. Can you briefly highlight the 8 common distractions to a meaningful and no regrets life?
Yeah. Thanks for letting me do that, by the way, because although we've talked a lot about possessions and even just in the beginning here, and we can talk about anything we want, but when I tell most people the title, Things That Matter, Overcoming Distraction to Pursue a More Meaningful Life, most people say that is a book that I need to read. Interestingly enough, I had the same with my book, Clutter Free with Kids. Whenever I mentioned I was writing a book called Clutter Free with Kids, that was like the first one where people like, oh, that's a book I need to read that book. And so I would say this title and they're like, I'm in, like, I need to read that book. My phone is like, technology is such a distraction in my life, and I can feel it and I can see it. And I talk about technology in the book, but I think when people pick up the book, they find that I go into much deeper topics than that. And so the 8 distractions that I cover in the book are fear, past mistakes, regret, the selfish pursuit of happiness, money, possessions, accolades, leisure, and technology. Those are the 8 distractions that I articulate in the book.
What made you find those? Like, how did you identify those, I guess?
They came from a variety of different spots. I recognized a large number of them in my own life. I noticed some in other people's lives. When I started talking about this topic and asking questions of people, and asking like, hey, what do you think distracts you or keeps you from pursuing your purpose? And they would offer some different distractions as well. We ended up doing a nationwide survey around some of these topics to also help solidify that these are actually distractions, not just that I struggle with, but other people struggle with as well. And so there's probably those 4. Did I get 4? Yeah, 4 things. My own life, other people's lives that I noticed, conversations I had with people, and then the survey is what contributed to the 8 distractions.
About the survey a little bit. You commissioned a national survey, and what were some of the most surprising results for you?
70% of people, I'll tell you the most surprising or the most interesting ones. 70% of people say that they have identified a clear purpose for their life, which was higher than I expected it to be. 77% of people followed up. So 70% said they could identify their clear purpose. 77% of people say that they feel like they are wasting time and money and resources on less important pursuits than those things that matter most, which was, I think, encouraging to me that I was writing a book that 77% of people should be reading. So I'm like, okay, there's a need. Not only is there a need for this book, but people see the need for the book, right? It's one thing, I think, for us to think we see a need in the world and then write it, but if people don't recognize that they have a need for it, does it ever get read? So that one, I was very fascinated in how we equate money with happiness and people's pursuit and desire for money. 80% of Americans say they'll be happier if they had more money. 77% of Americans say that they base daily decisions on how to have more money. So that was a big one. The most heartbreaking stat, I always mention it when I talk about the survey because I remember getting the results. I was sitting at my desk and I was kind of scrolling through them. 61% of people say that they're held back from the future they want because of mistakes they made in the past. And 55% of people say that they are held back from the future they want because of past mistakes committed against them in the past. And it was, even to this day, like it was the most heartbreaking, I think, of all the results to think that 60% of people say, I can't live the life I want because of something I did in the past, or even worse, 55%, something that someone did to me is keeping me from the life I want, was, sad, heartbreaking to read.
Well, what I love about the book is it's both a very hard look at our realities. It's kind of a tough love assessment about what is holding us back from a completely satisfying life. But it's one of the most hopeful books I've read in a long time. I think, just what you said about it's heartbreaking that people are held back by past mistakes, but you do provide hope that those can be, fixed. How would you encourage someone who still feels held back by a past mistake, even if they've already dealt with it? Like, for example, maybe they really said something that hurt someone's feelings and it fractured a long-term, either family relationship or friendship or whatever. They've apologized already to that person, and there's still basically a fracture. How do they proceed to move forward and fix that for a more satisfying life?
Yeah, I appreciate what you said there. And that's the first time I've done a lot of conversations about the book. And I think you're the first person to describe it in that way, as it both being a hard look at our lives and also hopeful. And I think for me, a lot of the book is just raising these issues and getting people to start thinking about them, to maybe not recognize how, hey, I guess I hadn't ever thought about how I always feel like I need more money, and maybe that is keeping me from things that actually matter. Or, hey, I guess I've never thought about work and leisure in that same way. And just raising the issues. Of course, very early on in the writing, I knew it was going to be more than just, I'm just going to raise these issues and leave them out there. Like, it was always, let's raise the issues and then let's talk about, so how do we begin to overcome these, and what are some practical steps that we can take? Because I suppose that's what makes it hopeful. For the past mistakes one, like, well, okay, so then all that to say, most chapters, someone once told me, it's like every chapter could be a book. Like, how do you overcome regret? Like that could be a whole book in itself. How do you overcome consumerism? How do you, own fewer possessions? And I'm like, these aren't just, whole chapter could be another book. This whole chapter could be like a whole bookshelf at a
You're
bookstore.
right.
And so my encouragement in that chapter about regret and past mistakes is, a good friend of mine once said, good leaders run towards problems. And by that, he meant, if you see a problem, he's talking about leadership. If you see a problem in your organization, don't just ignore it, but good leaders move towards it. And how do we solve this? And how do we move forward together? And so concerning regret, concerning past mistakes, like the first step is like we turn and face it, and we don't accept the fact that it's always going to be there and it is always going to keep me from my future. I think we say, okay, how do I, not every problem becomes a passion. It's not like everything that happened in the past has to become the problem that we want to solve in the world. But at some point we look at, okay, this mistake has ruined that relationship, and there's only so much I can do on my end to rectify it. Like there has to be something in your specific scenario. Like there does have to be some reciprocity, whatever the word, like, on the other side wanting to be back in a relationship, and maybe that's not going to happen. But I can still learn what I need to learn from that. And so that I can not make the mistake going forward, and I can still make the most of the current season of life that I'm in.
Well, and I think a lot of us are afraid to enter into meaningful conversations. We're a culture, globally probably, of just sort of a lot of small talk. And once we start talking, we're not a culture comfortable with talking about our feelings. And so we really have to get, I think, past that. And I think you make a good point for that. Like just, sort of, if you put the fear aside, the possibilities are enormous for a satisfying life. And, a couple of people that I admire tremendously in my personal life, the one common denominator through all of them was sort of a fearlessness about interpersonal communication. They just thought, what the heck, I'm going to throw it out there and I'm going to tell you what I feel or how I feel. And I applaud that, and I'm envious of it. And it's so wonderful. And it just, I think it's just, it's just so rare. We sort of jump at it. We sort of maybe even recoil from it when someone first starts talking about how they feel to us. Because
go ahead.
it's just our time, so it's, yeah.
I just saw a tweet, and I don't remember who put it out, some leader in some field. And, and he said, all of my greatest growth in life has come as a result of hard conversations. And, man, that was a couple of weeks ago that I read it, and it has stuck with me. And it doesn't always have to be like we're the ones saying the hard things, or we're the ones that sometimes I think we're just afraid of being in a conversation, like having to say something that makes us not sound smart or whatever. But like sometimes I think just asking questions of people, and not in an uncomfortable way, but asking questions that people want to answer. How did you overcome that? Or what did you learn through that experience? Or even being open and honest enough to, ask questions about ourselves. Is there something that I can do better in this relationship? Are there any, weaknesses that you notice in my life? I always think that's one of the best benefits of, I have a very supportive wife, and that's one of the greatest things, one of the greatest gifts that my wife can bring to me, I think, is, because we just can't see ourselves perfectly all the time. And, am I getting caught up in things I shouldn't be? Am I getting distracted? Do you see me pursuing things that are less important? And how can I do that better?
Tell us about the transition process when you went, speaking of your wife, when you went into blogging full time. How did you overcome your own fear of failure during that time? And how did you get that lovely wife on board with uh, this new thing?
Yeah, it wasn't particularly difficult to get my wife on board. Well, I mean, two different conversations. Getting her on board with minimalism. I guess she was on board there, but transitioning. So I was a pastor for 15 years and loved doing what I was doing. She wanted that type of life as well, where I didn't pick a career because it was going to make a lot of money. But I picked a career where I thought I could help people and play a difference in people's lives. And I thank my grandpa for setting that example. I thank my parents for setting that example. So that's where a lot of that motivation came from. And so I started blogging about minimalism 14 years ago. Not because I wanted to do it as a career, but I was just learning so much in the lifestyle that I wanted other people to own less and experience the same joy and benefit from it. And it grew, the blog grew, opportunities grew, and there came a point where I couldn't do both. I couldn't both pastor well and do the blog well, just because opportunities were becoming too many on both sides. And so eventually reached a point where I had to make a decision about which one I was going to do. The blog wasn't making nearly enough money to support our lifestyle. Just support life. We were a family of four. But we had lowered our standard of living to a point, just monthly costs, where we could do the math and, okay, here's how much we need to make, here's how much we have saved, and made that transition. Although it was tough for me. It was 3.5 years, I think, of worry and trying to get things in place and make sure I do it right. But all that to say, she wasn't opposed to the idea. She's never needed a lot to get by either. So,
well, that's wonderful. If it matters at all, I will tell you that I think this last book, Things That Matter, has you coming full circle, where I feel like it's really a hybrid self-help book, or it's a spiritual book too. I think that the pastor background in you comes through, periodically throughout the book. And I felt almost a spiritual feeling, as well as very, very practical advice as well. So I think in that sense, you've come full circle over all these years. So
I think it really is a good summation of the way that I've always talked about minimalism. I've always talked about owning less. For me, it was never just, I want to own less so that I can own less. It was always, I want to own fewer things. I want to pursue fewer things so that I have more of my life available for things that are actually fulfilling, more fulfilling than just owning a bunch of clutter. And so that's always a little bit of how I wrote. And I think one of the reasons that becoming minimalist has lasted so long, I think one of the reasons that people keep coming back to it year after year is it's not just, hey, here's how you declutter your closet. Although I talk about that, it's always, there's a deeper meaning behind it, a deeper intention behind why I want people to embrace this lifestyle and why I want to promote owning less. And so I think the book really lets me get into that more than I've done.
Well,
elsewhere.
it's almost like a trilogy in some ways, isn't it? In some ways, I feel like it is. But you talk a lot about service, and service is a key component of a satisfying life. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, every study ever done um, shows that people who live a selfless life, people who live a life that helps others, people who live a life that serves others, people who live a life that is generous to others, always self-report at the end of their life that they feel more fulfilled, they feel more satisfied, they have fewer regrets with the way they chose to live. We did a survey. I think 60% of people say that they think the way to live a most fulfilling life is to help others and serve others. And so it's not entirely new information. But yeah, it was important for me, I think, to, in that chapter, do a lot of the studies and a lot of the research and move beyond just saying, hey, you'll be most fulfilled if you live for others, but to actually point to a lot of the different studies that make that point. And a lot of the book is, it's not all this way, but a lot of the distractions I think in the book are distractions of selfish pursuits, wanting more money, wanting more stuff, wanting more fame, wanting to get out of work as soon as I possibly can. Like a lot of those, I think, are selfish distractions.
One thing that came to mind as I was reading the book is our senior move managers. As you know, NASMM, which, is hosting this webinar today, we're the National Association of Senior and Specialty Move Managers. And our senior move managers are, assisting older adults with later life transitions of downsizing, decluttering, moving, aging in place. And what I find so interesting is, almost to a person, these individuals who are starting small businesses came to senior move management because of a desire to serve. Can they, support themselves providing this service? Absolutely. But there's still this component of service. Many left lucrative, robust jobs in corporate America, in finance, marketing, project management, you name it. And they opened a business, a small business in aging services. And as a result, most of them, this is an encore career for most of them. And what I was thinking about as I was reading your book about service and our members who were inspired to serve, they are coming to us later in life. They've had, long careers in other areas. This is an encore career. What can we do as a society to sort of shave off a few decades and have service inspire younger people rather than people who have had significant life experience already?
As in the, helping people become move managers, or helping people that were
in general, how do we get people to sort of follow that path? Like, all of these people came to senior move management with significant life experience. I mean, our average, senior move manager is probably in their 50s or 60s. They have a lot of life under their belts. How do we get the 28-year-old inspired in careers in service? Obviously, there's, the teachers, nurses, all that kind of stuff. But these sort of more, out of the box careers in service.
There is
inspire younger people.
Yeah. So two thoughts. Number one, there's a great book by Arthur Brooks called From Strength to Strength. And his point in the book is how when we're younger, 20s, 30s, 40s, we have a lot more physical energy. We tend to have a lot more ambition to build. And so he would say, like, during that phase of life is when people are like really pushing to build. And then you reach this last half of your life, 50s, 60s and on, and you You don't have the same physical energy that you had when you were 25 or 30, but you have a wealth of wisdom and you have a wealth of knowledge. And so he makes the case that the people who are most successful in both stages of life make that transition and move from strength to strength. Where in many cases, the people who are helping move, it's become more of a teaching, life wisdom experience role, right? Like the people are, hey, I've been through this before. Let me help you make the most of your life. And so it doesn't surprise me that people are kind of moving out of that first phase of life into the second phase of life, looking for more opportunities to invest in others and use their experience as opposed to building, running the rat race, trying to move up the corporate ladder. So part of that makes sense. That's my first thought. The second thought is what I try to encourage people to think through is most jobs, I think, in the world today do help others and do serve others. But we don't tend to think of work in that way. We tend to think of work as the thing we do to get the paycheck, to buy the house or go on the vacation or get out of work and retire as soon as we possibly can. But really work is me doing what I'm best at to help other people so that they can go do what they're best at to help other people. And when we're all doing what we're good at in a selfless way, then we all benefit and all of society benefits. And so whether you're a grocery store clerk, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, whether you're a teacher, an architect, a truck driver, a landscaper, a manager, a corporate executive, like regardless of what you're doing, in most cases, see your work as service to others. Like, this is me leading people. This is me helping the farmer get food to the table and the money back to the farmer. This is me keeping the neighborhood beautiful. When we begin to see our work as that, I think most jobs can be seen in selfless ways. And I think even going back to that study that I mentioned, I think we find more fulfillment in our day and we find more fulfillment in our careers when it's not just the thing I do for the money, but it's this thing that I do well to help other people so they can do what they do well.
I think that's such an interesting take. It's definitely unusual, but I see your point completely. Let's talk about the M word, money. In your book, you note that survey results indicated 79% of respondents said they'd be happier with more money. You note the statistic is astonishing, considering the US is one of the wealthiest nations in the world. What's going on here?
It's probably the most least popular thing that I try to tell people, that they have enough money. It's always met with pushback and you don't understand me and my situation. I don't have enough money, but like literally 90%, I just saw the stat, CNBC, 90% of Americans say that they are stressed about money. And like, there are people in the world that don't have enough money, but it is not 90% of Americans. Like, we're one of the wealthiest nations in the history of the world. And so, well, actually we are statistically the wealthiest nation in the history of the world right now. And so, like, why are 90% of us stressed about money? It's not because we don't have enough money. We have food, we have shelter, we have clothing. Most of us have way more than we need. And so where does this come from? And it comes from us thinking that more money means more happiness, or more money means more security. And when we fall into that trap, thinking I'll be happier if I have more money, I'll feel secure if I have more money, then we're constantly stressed because our life could be better. Our life could be more secure if we just had more money. And so this becomes the constant pursuit. And what happens is we make the sacrifices, we change around our schedule, we find the new side hustle, we cut the corners, like we do whatever we need to do to get more money. And then we arrive at more money, whether it's more income coming in or more money in savings or just more net worth. And we realize that we're still not as happy as people who have more money, or we think we're not as happy as people with more money, or we're not as secure as people who have more money. And so we just get in this endless game of never taking a step back and saying, okay, maybe I don't need more money. We just constantly think, oh, I just need more money. If I had more money, I'd be happier. 87% of millionaires say that they don't consider themselves wealthy. Boston College did a great study of the ultra rich, people with an average net worth of $78 million, and asked them a bunch of questions, but one of them is, do you have enough money? And the most popular answer was, no, I need 25% more. And so you can't out earn this belief that you'll be happier if you have more money, because you just keep moving the goalposts. And I think this is what
do you attribute that to, though? Why is it social media? Is it traditional?
Oh, I don't think it's new. Yeah, I think it's the human condition. Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is something that is new to our generation. I think probably you could go back as long as you wanted and find that people fall into this trap of, if I had more money, if I had more stuff, I would be happier. But I don't think it's true. Actually, Harvard did a great study. I always point to it. They tried to answer this question, does money equal happiness? And all these different studies have said different things. There's no connection. Some people say if you have 20,000, it adds to happiness. Some people say if you have 75,000. Other studies say there's no limit to how much money can make us happy. And so they did this study of 100,000 adults. And what they ended up finding was, when you sacrifice time for more money, you're never as happy with the money as you think you would have been. And so you take on the new job opportunity to get the pay raise. And so you make all these sacrifices with your family. You're like, oh, I'm just going to work a little bit extra now, and I'll be able to spend more time with my family. And you never get there because you always keep wanting more. And in that scenario where you sacrifice greater values for more money, is the people who end up being the least satisfied with the money in the long run. So a little bit about what, I think things that I try to get to in things that matter is, let's not be sacrificing important pursuits just to have more money all the time.
The other part of the human condition is, once we get money, we have to spend it so that other people know we have this money. I mean, it's our senior move managers are working in homes all the time where, after the person has passed away or the person has gone into assisted living because of, some functional issue or whatever, when you look at the whole array of things that are in that home or in anyone's home, and I read somewhere that when you look at something like that, you should just automatically convert it to dollars, because what people don't realize is there is a price tag attached to every item we own.
Yeah.
And,
when I do a online course and, try to help people own less and walk through that. And I always think one of the hardest conversations that we have to have with ourselves is why did I accumulate so much stuff. Like I remember taking minivan loads full of things to Goodwill and Salvation Army, and it felt great. But at some point I was like, why did I have 3 minivan load full of things in my home that I didn't need? Like, why do we buy things that we don't need in the first place? And there's some blame to be laid on advertising and society and culture and corporations. Like you can put some blame out there, but no advertiser is driving you to Target to buy stuff. Like there's no advertisement that's clicking to ship on Amazon. Like we're making those decisions. And so there are some internal motivations that outside messaging is connecting with, whether it's trying to impress other people or, discontent in our own lives, feeling like those things are going to make us secure, trying to keep up with someone else, falling into fads, whatever it might be. It's never a joyful process, I think, realizing what those unhealthy motivations are, but it's so important to discover them, because I think that if we don't know they're there, then how can we ever
And it's never
overcome
too
them?
late to confront that. Let's talk about another M word in your book, the me monster, as you call it. You say somewhere along the way, it appears we human beings confuse the pursuit of happiness with the pursuit of self. You go on to quote Viktor Frankl when he said, happiness is not pursued, it must ensue. I thought this was amazing. That is, once we begin living our lives for others, our own happiness follows almost organically. A quick glance at Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok indicate the latest cultural movement is calling for all of us to pursue self-care. Have you noticed that? That's like everywhere. Take care of yourself, especially bubbled up during the COVID pandemic. Everyone wanted everyone else to take care of themselves. How do you think Frankl's quote survives today? Post-pandemic 2022, lots of media attention on self-care.
Yes. So it is always about what is the motivation behind the self-care. And so the background to the beginning of the conversation was like, there are two pursuits, I think, that are pretty common to us: the pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of self. Like most people don't have to be convinced to care for their own needs, and most people don't need to be convinced to pursue happiness. The problem becomes when we start thinking they're the same pursuit, that me getting as much as I can, me taking care of myself is going to result in the greatest happiness. Because all the studies show, like I mentioned before, that people who are most satisfied and most happy with their lives are people who lived their lives for others and lived selfless lives, not selfish lives. And so self-care plays a role here, because you can't pour from an empty cup, I think is how the phrase goes, right? Like I take care of myself just so that I live the most luxurious, comfortable life that I can live. No, I take care of myself so that I can be the best version of myself to serve and help others, whether it be my family, my kids, or whether it be the clients that I work with, or just the problem that I want to solve in the world, the community that I live in. And so self-care is important, and none of us should be working ourselves to the point where we're not helpful anymore to other people. But I think that it's a little bit like work and rest, kind of that conversation I have in the book about leisure and work. And I make the case, I don't work so that I can go on really nice vacations, but I go on a vacation so that I can come back and do my best work. I take off one day a week so that I can do my best work when I come back and serve others. And I think engage in self-care, so that I can be the best version of myself to live a life that helps the most, and
Well,
brings the greatest good.
I love how you close the loop on self-care as sort of a way to greater service. I don't think, the media or whomever is making that connection. It's a lot of, oh, do this, do that, take care of yourselves, buy this, buy that for, to take care of yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's what's happening. But really, genuine self-care in terms of rest and those kinds of things will allow you to be of greater service to, to those you love and to new people you might meet. Let's talk a little bit about the modern era problem of technology. You talk a lot about the distraction of technology and how that influences, our life satisfaction goals.
Yeah. And I always try to make the case that it's not a chapter against technology as a whole. I mean, we get to do what we're doing right now because of technology. I get to live my life because of technology. But the trivial can very quickly become the distraction from the thing that's actually important. And so I can use social media for good, and I hope I do, or it can become a distraction in my life, sometimes within 5 minutes of each other, and so what I challenge people to do in the book is twofold. Number one, to realize the difference between creation and consumption online or with technology. I can use my computer, I can use the internet, I can use social media to bring about good into the world, or I can use it to just endlessly scroll through my feed and distract me from the good that I can bring into the world. So recognizing that difference. And then the other thing is I encourage people to take a tech fast, at least once a year, I would say. And I know 29 days isn't possible for everybody, although I think it's possible for more people than think it is. And just like put everything away that you can for 29 days. I've done it like over a month, 2 or 3 different times in my life. And I still answer email at work, and I still use my phone for phone and text, but like the 40-day version, I didn't use my phone for anything except phone and text, and literally no social media. I didn't even use it for maps. I didn't use it for photos. I didn't use the credit card on there. I didn't use it for anything except phone or text. And it was helpful, I think, to recognize how much time actually gets wasted on some of that stuff.
That's impressive. It's a goal of mine to do that, but gosh, I don't know. The word that you used in the book, and it really struck a chord with me, I don't think I'll ever forget it, is, the endless scrolling is soul robbing. And I thought, boy, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But you know what? We are done with our questions. I mean, I could do a whole other hour, but we've got some of our members, some of our audience have a few questions for you. So I think as we're closing in on the end of the hour, we will go to those. So Jennifer, do you?
Hey, yes, we have a couple of questions. The first question is from Bev Blair. A big fear for many around is not having enough money and not knowing how much they will need when they retire for their care requirements. Uncertainty around health and longevity. Do you have any advice?
Man, sometime notice how many advertisements focus on having enough money for retirement. Like it when you start noticing them, it is unbelievable. At least the channels that I watch, how many conversations, how many services are being sold to us to have enough money for retirement. Probably a financial advisor, at some point goes into that conversation. I write a little bit in the book about how the whole idea of retirement is basically about a 120-year-old experiment. Like it's a pretty new invention in our society that people would stop working at an age picked out of the hat or set by the government, that age 65 is when people stop working. And the whole idea that we would ever stop working is a pretty new phenomenon. And I'm not sure it's working so well. I think that it leads to a lot of stress through life, that I make sure I have enough money for when that time comes. I think the whole idea of the goal of work is to get out of work as soon as I possibly can. Robs work of all the joy that it can actually have in us. And again, a somewhat unpopular opinion, but I don't think retirement should be the goal for all of us all the time. I think that instead, if we live a content life and live a simple life and find a job that we enjoy doing, that we remove a lot of that stress of needing to have enough by a certain age. Now, that doesn't discount expenses at the end of life, but I'm just saying, I think some of that reframing of the whole conversation can be helpful.
Okay, here's another one. Thank you for the insight. How can we present the minimalist lifestyle to our clients as senior mood managers when it may be such a big leap? What are the baby steps for them?
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be, you need to become a minimalist. I always think the phrase is helpful. I think that the goal of life is to own just the right amount of possessions. I don't want my possessions to be a burden in too many or too few, but most people live in a way of life where their possessions have become a burden because they have too many. And so finding just the right amount means that they need to do some minimizing of possessions. And so the word minimalism can be, I think, distracting and can be immediately a barrier that needs to be overcome. The way I think we do it is we always start with helping people realize how much of a burden their possessions have become, how much money gets wasted on pursuing possessions and buying possessions, how much time and energy gets wasted on organizing and maintaining and cleaning and repairing and replacing. And just start with the simple question of, if I were to own less stuff, I could do more. Whatever it is, if I wasn't just wasting money buying stuff, if I wasn't wasting time taking care of stuff, what could I be doing more of in my life? I think that's always the first question. I always ask people to answer it this way. I desire to own less stuff so that I can blank and have them fill in that last half of that sentence, whatever it is. And then work from, okay, then this is the motivation. Let's own less stuff so you can go do more of what actually matters in life.
Okay, I've got one more in the queue. How do you counsel people when they associate, for example, their parents' estates and belongings with the memory of their parents in their lives? They struggle to release the stuff and forget about, dishonoring their parents. How do you, help them part basically with possessions without parting with the memory of their, loved ones?
So there are good, I don't have the link, but I think you can just Google generally this thing, and maybe you guys even know it right away. But scientifically, the studies show that if you take a picture of an item, it becomes easier for you to get rid of it. The memory isn't in the possession. The memory is in you, and a picture can help spark that memory as much as the actual possession can. I always encourage people. I always ask people a question when they're like, I can't get rid of what my parents had, or I can't get rid of a spouse that can't get rid of their stuff. I always say, if you were to die, would you want your kids to keep everything that you own, especially if it's keeping them from living their best life? And no one, I can't think of anyone who's ever answered yes. Like, I want my kids to keep all of my stuff. That's not how we think. I want my kids to keep a few things of mine that remind me of them. I would hope that my kids would keep a few things that help spark the values that were important to me, that I wanted to pass on to them. But for the most part, the loving thing is I want them to make the most of their season of life. And I know they can't do that by trying to take care of everything I ever owned. And the same is true of your parents. Your parents don't want you to keep everything they ever owned. They would want you to curate a few items, a few, 2, 3, 4 things that most represent who they were, and what you want to be true of your life going forward, in that you saw in them and want to emulate. And so that's how I always encourage people to overcome that obstacle and overcome that hurdle. Same with gifts. Like, hey, how do I get rid of this gift that someone gave to me? I just asked the same question. If you gave a gift to someone and found out later that they didn't want it, do you want them to keep it? No, you don't, especially if they just kept it because you gave them to it. Like, I gave you this gift because I thought it would benefit your life. If it's not benefiting your life, then get rid of it. And I think the same is true for most people who give gifts, have the same approach to it.
Well, less is more is a cliche because it's true.
Yeah.
So if you have a few curated items from a loved one, those are going to be infinitely more meaningful than if you have, a whole room of them. So at least that's, what I think is the general consensus.
Yeah.
So, our move managers feel that, when they tell a family member, your child doesn't want this, but we're going to find, someplace else, someone who does want it. There might be a museum that wants it, a school or whatever. It's ultimately, going to find a good home, but it may not be with the person that you initially thought was going to want it. And sometimes that can be even more gratifying to give it to somebody who really wants it. So, well, Joshua, our hour has come to a close. It's so fast. Like I said, we could do this for days. Again, congratulations on the book, on all you've been doing. And I know you're starting a big book tour, and I think we're one of your first stops. So we're very grateful. And thank you for being so gracious today and spending some time with us.
Oh, it's been good to connect again. Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys and all the work that you do. And I've referred to your organization and at least some of my books, if not all of them. So appreciate it.
Well, once you're in the NASMM circle of trust, there's no getting out. So
That's great.
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Bye.